In today's video, we'll be covering the fourth and final part of the obscure conspiracy theory iceberg. Privyet, my fellow Kiwistanis, I hope you're all having a nice day, and a warm welcome to all visitors to the official YouTube channel of the Kingdom of Kiwistan. My name is President Pablo, and today we're going to be covering theories ranging from nuclear weapons to uncontacted tribes. But before we get into it, with a quick word from the Tsar of Kiwistan, Jaffa the Great. Another great speech by Tsar Jaffa. Now without further ado, let's dive down this iceberg. This one I found quite interesting. At a site in China, archaeologists discovered tortoise shells with symbols engraved on them that somewhat resembled Chinese characteristics, with some scholars claiming that this is a very early, albeit basic, form of writing. Around the same time period, a bunch of clay tablets from the Neolithic Vinca culture in Europe contain symbols which some claim is a form of writing. However, this is disputed by other archaeologists and scholars. This one I found quite disappointing. Apparently there's a photo of Mount Fuji before its eruption taken in 1707, and that's all I can find about it. I mean, seriously, if you're going to make a conspiracy theory, at least make it something more interesting than that. I'm really sorry, but I couldn't find anything relating to 1934 nuclear testing, so to make it up to you, I found a bunch of other conspiracy theories about nuclear testing prior to the Trinity test in 1945. The most prominent among them being that proposed by German historian Rainer Karlsch, who claims that on March 3rd, 1945, German scientists under the command of the SS tested a crude attempt at an atom bomb, also known as a dirty bomb, in Thuringia. Allegedly, this explosion killed hundreds of forced labourers, which was covered up by the SS. He also found unusual traces of radiation in the soil, and radiation sickness began to prop up among local residents in the area in the years following the alleged test. Some locals also report hearing a loud explosion on the same day and spotting a bright flash. Another alleged, and personally this one I find a bit more interesting, German nuclear test was reported by Luigi Ramusa, who, in case you couldn't tell already by his name, was an Italian journalist who served as a war correspondent. In an interview with the Guardian newspaper, years later, he told them about how Italian fascist leader Benito Mussolini dispatched him to the Baltic island of Rügen to witness a top-secret German weapons test on his behalf. After meeting with Joseph Goebbels, the German head of propaganda, and the Austrian painter himself, you all know who that is, he was led to a concrete bunker with reinforced glass to witness the test. Then it detonated. He recalled there was a slight tremor in the bunker, a sudden blinding flash, and then a thick cloud of smoke. It took the shape of a column and then that of a big flower. This is similar to the mushroom cloud phenomenon reported in other nuclear tests. The officials told me we had to remain in the bunker for several hours because of the effects of the bomb. When we eventually left, they made us put on a sort of coat and trousers which seemed to be made of asbestos, and we went to the scene of the explosion, which was about 1.5 kilometers away. The effects were tragic. The trees around had been turned to carbon. No leaves, nothing alive. There were some animals, sheep, in the area, and they too had been burnt to a crisp by the force of the explosion. Now, to me personally, this seems pretty consistent with reports of other nuclear explosions and weapon tests, but this leaves the question, if the Germans had a nuclear weapon, then why didn't they use it? So maybe this was just an early prototype of a nuclear weapon, and they were never able to fully complete an atomic bomb they could use against their enemies for real. Unfortunately, a lot of people die every year as a result of mistakes made by doctors and surgeons. However, allegedly there is a study that has been kept hidden that shows 4% of these mistakes were actually intentional, and maybe this has been kept secret to maintain public trust in the health system, or actually it's part of some sort of ritual sacrifice disguised as tragic accidents. 969 asteroid landing claims that the first moon landing was actually on an asteroid, which is complete rubbish. The moon landings were real and will go down as not only the greatest achievement in American history, but the greatest achievement in human history. People who claim otherwise are just spreading anti-space exploration propaganda, and personally I get quite annoyed when they suggest that mankind is unable to pull off such an incredible achievement. .320 Satanic Heresy, from what I can find, is referring to conspiracy theories regarding the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, which was called by Emperor Constantine of the Roman Empire to resolve disputes regarding official Christian canon. The council concluded that Jesus Christ was indeed the Son of God, and to suggest otherwise was heresy. However, some claim that during the council, numerous Gospels were covered up as Emperor Constantine was more concerned with using Christianity as a political tool to unite his empire rather than being faithful to the original source material. Some even go as far as saying Emperor Constantine wasn't a real Christian, he was actually the first Roman emperor to convert to Christianity, and was secretly a member of a cult that worshipped Sol Invictus, a Roman sun god. They also claimed that pagan elements were deliberately injected to form a false man-made religion rather than the true teachings of Jesus, which were covered up. One example of this is Christmas being celebrated on what used to be the Saturnalia, a Roman pagan festival dedicated to the sun god Saturn, which this was more symbolic. It was more about replacing the pagan religion of Rome with Christianity to make it official. But in doing so, believers of this theory consider modern Christianity to be satanic and a perversion of the true religion. However, the evidence is very much against this theory, and the vast majority of Christian theologians back the council's decision. The Calvine photo is a very well-known UFO photo taken at the hamlet of Calvine in Scotland back in 1990. Because of its unusual shape, some suggest it was a floating island, and personally I can definitely see the resemblance. So maybe there's some sort of gravity anomaly that had caused an actual island to float, and that's what they saw that one day, it just floating around. Dan Schneider, 4chan whistleblower, is referring to a number of posts which floated around on 4chan back in the early 2010s, alleging that Dan Schneider, who worked as a showrunner for Nickelodeon on a number of shows, was abusing child actors while on set. This was years before the allegations against him came out, and that maybe someone on the inside knew what was happening, and rather than alerting the appropriate authorities, like they should have, they decided to post about it on 4chan for some reason. Alright, this one I'm excited to talk about. I have a cousin who lived in Alaska who told me there are urban legends that uncontacted tribes still exist in the wilderness far away from civilization. This makes sense because Alaska is nearly half the size of the continental United States, yet has less than 1 million people living there. There are also myths that feral groups of humans live in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, descended from a group of Civil War soldiers who deserted. Allegedly, a group of park rangers encountered them in 1969, and they are behind hikers disappearing in the area so they can eat them. So if there are any Kiwistanis in America, I'd appreciate it if you could go find one of them for me. That would be pretty cool. Black Death was a biological agent suggests that the Black Death, which was a plague which wiped out over a third of Europe's population, was deliberately created. One suggests that it was done as some form of biological warfare by the Ottoman Empire in order to weaken Europe, as at the time the Ottoman Empire controlled the Balkans and were looking to expand more into Europe. Others suggest that it was released on purpose as a form of demonic ritual sacrifice. This one is an urban legend that during the Great Depression, celebrities in the entertainment industry would participate in human zoos where they would act out what they were famous for on display for onlookers, so they could get by since they were all out of business as a result of the financial crisis. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Long live Kiwistan!